Here's the scenario. John and Melissa are clients of mine. They don't have much income. John has wages. Melissa has unemployment. They've both got the permanent fund dividend. And they want to know what's best. Should they file jointly or should they file separately? Well, from experience, I know it's going to be they're better off filing jointly. But we're just going to run this scenario and try to do it both ways to see what's better for them and by how much. So here's John's W-2. He made $97,000 and he had $10,500 in withholding. And here's his 1099 for the permanent fund dividend. Melissa has a 1099 for unemployment. She collected $15,500 and had $1,550 withheld. And she also got a 1099 for the permanent fund dividend. And most of the time, people aren't going to come in with their 1099s from the permanent fund dividend because you can only access that online. And for some reason, they actually restrict access after March 31st. So if you haven't printed it out by then, you're not going to get it. But it's not a big deal. We know how much the permanent fund dividend is. It's the same for everybody. So we don't have to have this form to verify how much they got. So when we do the tax return, we're going to put John and Melissa Jones. We're going to start off by doing a joint return. John and Melissa Jones, and it really doesn't matter who's listed first on the return. But the IRS does like you to be consistent from year to year. So if last year it was John and Melissa, they want this year to be John and Melissa. If some people are super traditional and they always put the husband first, and some people want to put whoever made the most money first, but it really doesn't matter. Like Melissa could be first even if she had no income. It's just the joint taxpayers. They're just two separate taxpayers. Another thing to note is that your spouse is never your dependent. So some people will list their wife in the dependent section, but no, you just file a joint return. They're just the other person on your return. And in fact, you get a better benefit from filing jointly with your spouse with no income than you do just being able to claim them as a dependent. So we list them here. We're going to mark married filing jointly. And here's what the rest of their tax return looks like. The income from the W-2, $97,000, goes on line 1A and carries down to line 1Z. Then line 8 is $18,904. And where does that come from? That comes from Schedule 1. Schedule 1 is when we have attachments to a tax return, we'll put both taxpayers' names, but only the first taxpayer's Social Security number.
Okay.
With a couple of exceptions, things like Schedule C and Schedule SE are tied to the individual taxpayer. So we might have, if they're both in business, we might have a Schedule C for John and a separate Schedule C for Melissa. But for this one, this is just their joint income, so it's going to report all of their income. So line 7 for unemployment compensation is where we put the unemployment from the 1099-G. And then for 8G is where we put the Alaska Permanent Fund dividends. We'll combine those into one number. 1,702 each was 3,404. That 8G carries down to this summary row, line 9. That 3,404 plus the 15,500 comes to 18,904. So that 18,904 is reported, carries over from Schedule 1 to line 8 of the tax return, making their total income $115,904. They get a standard deduction for married filing jointly of $27,700, which makes their taxable income $88,204. If we look that up in the table, we get total tax of $10,147. And their withholding is going to be reported on two separate lines. There's withholding from a W-2 and withholding from a 1099. Their W-2 withholding was $10,550. $10,500. and their withholding from a 1099 was $1,550 for a total withholding of $12,050. We compare their total payments to their total tax. $12,050 minus $10,147 is $1,903. So that's how much they overpaid and also how much they want refunded. Okay, so that's not too bad. If we do separate now, right.
Separately.
Okay, and page 2 of the Schedule 1 is all blank. Okay, if we file separately, so here's John's tax return. We're going to list just his name. We would put both their Social Security numbers over here in the Social Security box, number box. Check married filing separately. Melissa's name is going to go down here on the other information line. And John's only income was $97,000 from his W-2 and $1,702 from the permanent fund dividend, for a total income of $98,702. And he only gets his half or his share of the standard deduction, $13,850. So his total income, his taxable income is $84,852. If we look at that up in the chart, we'll find out his tax is $13,980. If we compare that to what we got for their joint return, we already see that his tax all by himself is $4,000 higher than their total tax jointly. And then his withholding was $10,500. So this time, tax is more than payments. So he owes $3,480. And then Melissa's return, well, there's a Schedule 1, just has a permanent fund dividend. And now Melissa's return is going to have her name in the heading and John's name in the other information box next to the filing status. Her only income was, unemployment plus permanent fund dividend. And she also gets her standard deduction, so her taxable income comes out to $3,352. So her tax is $338. So not only was John's tax already about $4,000 higher than their joint tax, but she also has a tax bill. Fortunately for her, her withholding was more than her tax bill, so she would get a refund of $1,212, which is still less than their joint refund would have been. So, yeah. So if I were to present these options, I would say, well, you can file joint and you get a $1,900 refund, or if you file separate, you get a $1,200 refund, so you've lost $700. Not only that, you owe $4,000 to the IRS.
Yeah.
What do you think they're going to pay?
It's not a refund if I have to pay taxes. That's just
right.
Yeah. Oh, it's terrible.
So yeah, and that's pretty typical. So I would say that in my experience, about 1/3 of taxpayers will break even. There'll be no difference between filing joint or filing separate. And about 65% of taxpayers are better off filing joint. So 65 and 33, there's still 2% left over. About 2%, maybe even less than that, would turn out better filing separately.